Hello. I have some very tragic news to inform you of before we start today's lecture. Um, it's bit the inside of my lip and it really, really hurt. So I'm doing weird things during this video. It's because of that. It still hurts. I wasn't even eating anything. I was like taking a sip of water and then I like crunched because I like to chew my water forcefully. Anyway, welcome to day 8. We're going to talk about being financially sound, safe, and sound. We're really talking about fraud today. And the best thing you can do to prevent fraud is to be a bit of a skeptic. Okay? Now, that is a philosophical position you can take about anything. Like, you could be a complete skeptic like Descartes and say, well, maybe nothing exists at all out in the universe. Except this very thing that is saying nothing exists. Whatever it bumps up against, right? But we don't even have to be that sort of skeptical to be able to protect ourselves from fraud. Research shows, and we know this, that people who are trusting of others live better lives, right? It doesn't actually pay to go around being paranoid of everything and believe that everybody's out to get you, right? It doesn't work out. But when it comes to money, trusting the wrong people can be extremely costly, right? When it comes to friendships, it can be very costly. Like when it comes to family, it can be very costly. Whatever it is. So the point is, we're not trying to be skeptical of everything and disbelieve everyone and, never stop looking over our shoulder. Really, our goal is to make sure that where our money is concerned, we are not constantly at risk of losing it to someone who is a little bit nefarious. So how do we trust safely, right? How do we use trust effectively? How do we use skepticism effectively to keep us safe? Well, we have to figure out who to believe. And doing that is a big part of preventing fraud, right? If somebody new enters my sphere and they present something for me like an opportunity or a problem or something like that, the first thing I'm doing is I'm vetting them, right? I'm saying, who is this person? Is this legitimate? Is this real? Do I need this? Can I back this up? On and on and on. We ask a series of questions, right? Because we're trying to protect ourselves from fraud. So how do we do that? How do we keep ourselves safe? Well, that's kind of what we're getting into today. And we'll start with a few of the sort of bigger financial frauds that exist out there, and then we'll get into more specific ones. But fraud in general is just deception, right? It's like tricking someone into buying something that doesn't exist, or selling something, that's not worth what it's supposed to be worth, or, on and on and on, right? Basically, something is promised that either doesn't exist or exists in a form that cheats you in some way, is misrepresented, right? 1 in 5 Americans have been the victim of financial fraud. So it's fairly common, right? And again, when you hear that stuff, you can think like, okay, yeah, but I'm in the 4 out of 5. It's like, all right, you are now, but for how long? Older victims tend to be, more common. However, this can affect anyone. And I'm not going to do a lot with System 1 and 2 today, but just keep in mind, this is one of the reasons we talk about System 1 and 2, is because System 1 says, I recognize this piece of the puzzle, this is probably all good. It doesn't do very well checking for fraud in many cases. It's good at checking for bears, not so much at checking for fraud. System 2 can say, well, just because they have my name on it, doesn't mean that they're a legitimate business, right? And just because they know that I bought a house and they're sending me all these documentations about it, that's a public thing, right? Everybody knows that. Therefore, these might not be legitimate insurers trying to contact me, right? Whatever it is, you'll be bombarded with fraud throughout your life, and at some point, you might mess up because System 1 says, I don't know, I think this is right. There are emails that I've opened in the past where I'm just clicking it, and I'm like, I know I shouldn't be clicking this, but I'm doing it anyway, right? Fraud is so common, it's because it's so easy to defraud people. It's like, how much does it cost to send an email? It costs nothing, right? So you just dump it on everyone, and somebody will click that link. It's hard to avoid it. There's probably plenty of examples in your inbox right now, actually. There are some common financial frauds that show up, fairly often. One of them is a Ponzi scheme. That's basically giving people unsustainable returns on their investment. And the way that you give them such high returns with no risk to them is because you're paying them money from the new investors that are being brought into the scheme, okay? So you're constantly recruiting new people who will fund the high interest returns of the earlier people who joined the scheme, right? And it goes on and on and on. But at some point, you run out of new investors to drag into the scheme, and then the whole thing collapses. The people who made money pull out, and then everybody's left holding the bag, right? Now, you could say cryptocurrency is a Ponzi scheme, but it's not intended to be. It's just kind of how people invest in it, unfortunately. If you get in early enough, you can get these crazy high rewards. If you get in late, you could get the rug pull, right? And you get left with a worthless coin because somebody pulled out all the value. So you got to be really careful about what you get into. Even something that's not supposed to be a fraud, like cryptocurrency, can end up turning out to be a fraud. And a lot of coins actually are frauds. Now, I'm not going to say most coins. I think most coins are invented to do something, even if that something is just to make money. But a few of them are invented actually to defraud people, right? So just because you can invest doesn't mean you necessarily should invest. Pyramid schemes are pretty similar to Ponzi schemes. The idea is you're selling a product, recruiting members, but instead of actually promising those big returns, you basically pay out commissions from bringing in new members, right? You end up making more money from recruiting than selling. Does this sound familiar? Does this sound like MLM schemes? Yeah, it's basically that, okay? At the top of the pyramid, you make tons of money because everybody's sort of flowing, all that money is flowing upwards to you, but it's only sustainable if you can continue to pull in new people to take money from. So let's say, oh, it seems reasonable for me to recruit 6 people to this scheme, right? I'd be like, okay, if you 6 get in, I'll make enough money to support myself. But then those 6 people have to recruit 6 more people to sustain themselves, right? And then those 6 people have to recruit 6 people each. And so that means after 13 rounds, you would actually run out of people in the world, right? So it's unsustainable because you can't have a business structure where you constantly need to bring in more people in order to pay the people above them. That's unsustainable. You don't have enough people in the world, right? So if you see something like that and somebody says, this is how I'm working from home and making money, you say to yourself, they're not making money. And if they are making money, they're making it essentially fraudulently. And that's not great. And even if they're not, they're making it unsustainably. Okay, so please don't jump into those. There's a lot of common financial frauds out there that involve telemarketing, and that's because it's pretty cheap to call people or email people or whatever else because it's just, spam out all these things and then a million people have to read it. When a product or service is misrepresented by phone, email, or text, that's essentially telemarketing fraud. If you ever see something offering you a free gift, like you won this, no, you didn't. Okay, I'll just tell you right now, you didn't win anything. Sometimes this comes in the mail too. Like I remember they used to send out ads from some of the car dealerships that were like, oh, scratch off the slot machine and see if you won. And you'd scratch it off because why not, right? Little scratches. And it would say like, you won a truck. And you're like, what? And then you're like, what are the odds of that? If you go to the dealership, they're like, oh yeah, great. And then they give you this whole sales bit. I didn't do this, but this is what I've heard. And then in the end, it's like, well, actually, you're just in some raffle for the truck or something, right? Like it's all fake. They just do it, with enough fine print that it's legal. But to me, that's essentially fraud. All right, so what are these going to look like, these messages out there, besides the ads from the car places? Well, here's one from years ago I got that just has a really special place in my heart. So I like to trot it out at times like this. Here's a letter from the front line in the war on fraud. This is from Sergeant Jeff Frawley, who calls himself an American soldier in Iraq. And the subject was important message. So I saw that and said, well, if it's that important, I better open this. It says, good day, my name is Sergeant Jeff Frawley. I'm an American soldier. I'm serving in the military of 1st Armored Division in Iraq. As you know, we are being attacked by insurgents every day and car bombs. Okay, car bombs are attacking. We managed to move funds belonging to Saddam Hussein's family. Okay, were you supposed to do that? Total amount is US $25 million in cash, mostly $100 bills. That seems relevant. This money has been kept somewhere outside Baghdad. Well, that could be like literally anywhere in the world, couldn't it? For some time, but with the proposed troop withdrawal by President Barack Obama, remember him? We are afraid that the money will be discovered, hence we want to move this money to you for safekeeping pending the completion of our assignment here. Why me? You can go to this web link to read about events that took place there. Get a whole history. We are ready to compensate you with good percentage of the funds, no strings attached, just for you to help us move it out of Iraq. The safety of you and your family is guaranteed. Why would my family be unsafe? Iraq is a war zone, so we plan on using diplomatic means to shipping the money out as military cargo using diplomatic immunity. That's not what diplomatic immunity means. If you are interested, I will send you the full details. My job is to find a good partner that we can trust and assist us. Can I trust you? I thought they already decided to send it to me. When you receive this letter, kindly send me an email signifying your interest, including your confidential telephone number for quick communication. Also, your contact details will be needed for the shipment. This is 100% risk-free. With regards. I love the ending. This is 100% risk-free. It's like, oh, good, because I was getting concerned about that, right? Here's another one. From Chris Brown, but not that Chris Brown. Subject, Dear God's elect. So apparently I am the chosen one. I'm writing this mail to you with heavy tears in my eyes and great sorrow in my heart. My name is Mrs. Christabel Brown. Oh yeah, different Chris. And I'm contacting you from my country, Tunisia. I want to tell you this because I don't have any other option to tell you, as I was touched to open up to you. So you notice they always try to make you feel special with these things, right? They say like, you are the one. You are the chosen one. We believe that you can take our money and bail us out, and we trust you, okay? You always have to ask yourself, like, why me, right? What did I do? So when I get mail, it's like, oh, it's because I just, bought this thing or signed up for this thing. Or it's not about that. It's that I was on a list somewhere. And with spam emails, it's literally like you had an email. That's why you got this email. I'm married to Mr. Smith Brown, man with 2 last names, who worked with Tunisian Embassy in Burkina Faso for 9 years before he died in the year 2005. It's been a while. We were married for 11 years without a child. Okay. He died after a brief illness that lasted for only 5 days. That is extremely brief. Since his death, I decided not to remarry. When my late husband was alive, he deposited the sum of US $8.5 million. Wait, $8,500,000. Okay, they said that weird. In a bank in Ouagadougou, the capital city of Burkina Faso in West Africa. Presently, this money is still in the bank. He made this money available for exportation of gold from Burkina Faso mining. Okay, that doesn't seem relevant. Recently, my doctor told me that I would not last for the period of 2 months due to cancer problem. Sorry to hear that. The one that disturbs me most is my stroke sickness. Oh, also that. Having known my condition, I decided to hand you over this money to take care of the less privileged people. You will utilize this money the way I am going to instruct herein. Okay. I want you to take 30% of the total money for your personal use and your family, while 70% of the money will go to charity. Quote, people in the street and helping the orphanage. Okay. Which orphanage? I grew up as an orphan, and I don't have anybody as my family member, just to endeavor that the house of God is maintained. So I have to build a tabernacle, or what? I'm doing this so that God will forgive my sins and accept my soul because these sicknesses have suffered me so much. I don't know if I can be a part of, saving your soul, lady. As soon as I receive your reply, I shall give you the contact of the Bank of Burkina Faso, and I will also instruct the bank manager to issue you an authority letter that will provide you the present beneficiary of the money in the bank. That is, if you assure me that you will act according as I stated herein. I mean, I'll do my best, Chris, but I still don't know which orphanage this is going to. It'd be nice if all frauds were this easy to spot, wouldn't it? But it's not as simple as checking your junk mail, as it turns out. Skepticism is about inquiry, which is about asking questions, okay? We don't ask questions if we don't care. We care. We're interested in knowing something. We're not skeptical just to be obnoxious. We're skeptical because we want to know the answer. But before we assent to believing or trusting an answer, we have to require a few things, right? So what is your standard of proof? What do you need to see to know that this is a fraud, this is not a fraud? And how do you know when you're being fooled, right? Where is that line? Especially when you're not just reading an email, but also, watching videos or listening to podcasts or reading a book recommended by a podcast or whatever it is, right? How do we know what to believe? Because just because something is in a print format or just because it's being broadcast, in class or something like that, doesn't mean it's actually true, does it? You think about the news, right? How much do you trust the news? And this is a really loaded question. I think a lot of people would say, I don't trust the news. But at the same time, if you don't trust the news, what do you trust, right? What's the replacement for the news? Do you trust companies like Equifax, who was happy to dump your personal information a couple years ago, or Google, who is constantly collecting all your personal information? Do you trust Congress? I laugh as I say that. Do you trust the university? Do you trust the metaverse? Which is where Pinocchio lives, I think. Should you? Probably not. So there's really two things we have to believe. There's information, so the news, right? But the news somehow without any subjectivity, which, does that even exist? I don't know. But information, and then there's ideas, which is the subjectivity. So it's like information is supposed to be objective. It's probably not, but it's supposed to be, right? And then ideas are supposed to be subjective. So it's like I can report on the facts, and then I can make a claim about that, right? Or I can give you the data, and then I tell you this is my hypothesis, right? Information, ideas, information, ideas. But where we get these things matter, because in a lot of cases these get all jumbled up together, right? Like it used to be clear when you were reading the newspaper, because people used to read newspapers, that there was a section that was called, news, or U.S., or events, or world, or whatever it is. And it would tell you, like, here are some things that happened. And them choosing what things to show you is a subjective choice, yes. But in theory, the reports they had on these news events were just, like, the facts, okay, ideally. But then you would turn a few pages and you would get to a page called opinion or editorial or columnists or whatever it is. And in there you would find not just the facts, you'd find people telling you about the facts, right? And saying, well, actually, here's what it means, or here's what I think is happening. But it was clearly delineated in the newspaper. This is the news. These are the editorials. This is the information. These are the ideas. And now that news is on TV eternally, and it's on the internet even more eternally, all this stuff gets jumbled together. The facts and the subjectivity get all mixed up all the time. So there could be like truth involved, but there's also all kinds of other opinions involved, right? How are you supposed to separate those things? So the end result is this. It's not just an on or an off switch, like this is factual and this is not. It's a sliding scale of belief. Like I believe this one this much, I believe this one this much. So whose fault is all this? Well, I blame Matthew Brady. He was a Civil War photographer in America, and he was very big on telling stories, right? So what's interesting about photographs is that they initially showed up, and they showed us this image of the world that had never been like recorded before, right? Because there's real life, and then there's paintings, and then there's photographs. And you can see there's a progression there that happened over time, but he used photographs to tell stories. So here's an example of a painting. Okay, this painting is called Washington Crossing the Delaware. It's supposed to be during the Revolutionary War, where on Christmas they're crossing because the enemy doesn't expect them on Christmas, or Christmas Eve, or whatever it was. Is this image like an accurate portrayal of what happened at that time in the late 18th century? Is this what the people looked like? Is this how they went? Was Washington really like doing his whole Captain Morgan thing up there? Or is this a fraud? Is this image true or is it a fraud? Well, guess what? It's not binary, right? You're not just all true or all a fraud. There's a sliding scale of belief. And in this case, the fact that it's a painting tells you what? It tells you that it's not exactly true, right? Excuse me. It's not exactly painted to life, especially because it was painted long after the fact, right? The person who painted this did not know what these folks looked like in these boats, right? Like they didn't know what the sky looked like, all that. They're painting it to tell a story. But when you see a painting or a drawing or anything like an illustration made by a person, or even a computer illustration, whatever, like, it's been chosen for a reason. It's not an accident that the American flag is here in this sort of dramatic angle, or that Washington is facing forward, or that, the sky is like lightning, as they approach, they're going through dawn and into, the new world and all that. Like, all that's done for a reason, right? To create an impression. So it's not a fraud, even though it's not, like, historically perfectly accurate. It's just a story in a picture, right? And they're trying to tell you a story. But when something is painted, it's really obvious that it's a story in a picture. What happens if you look at something like this? Now, first of all, ask, is this image true? and you'd probably say, yes, this is a real image. It was a photograph taken during World War II, right before the Normandy invasion, right? So, yes, it's true. Seems to be true. True event displayed with a photograph. Is it a fraud? No, we just explained that, right? It's a photograph. No, it's not a fraud. It is true. What does this do for us? It tells us where we are, for one thing. It puts us right in the middle of this whole thing, which makes it feel even more authentic, right? Back here, when we look at Washington, we think, oh, this is an abstracted idea of people, moving towards a greater, new dawn and all that in America. And this one is like a bunch of people standing around waiting to die, effectively. And it's a lot grittier, and it's a lot like more of a feeling of like a calm before the storm where these people might all get wiped out for all we know, right? Like, doesn't feel like a fraud to me. It feels very true. So the problem that Matthew Brady invented was that he wanted to tell a story. So he thought, well, I have this great new technology, photography, but I don't want to be limited to real life. I want to be able to tell stories with photography. The problem with photography, though, is it screams to us, this is real. This is the truth. Whereas a painting says, hey, this is a painting. So it's kind of real, kind of not real. It's sort of built into the medium. But a photograph says, this is true. And so what Brady would do is he would go out and he would take pictures of Civil War battlefields. And on these battlefields, there were many, they were dead soldiers. And so he would take these pictures and then publish them in the newspapers to tell people, like, here's what real life looks like, and it's not great. But another thing he would do is he would have his assistants go around and start, like, carrying the bodies and, like, stacking them up in piles. And then he would take photographs of the piles of dead. And so they'd end up with these really kind of gruesome looking, photographs in the end that say, wow, look at all these, people are buried in piles, this deep on these battlefields. So it's like, yeah, it tells a story about war that says war ain't great, but at the same time, was it totally accurate to reality? No. But did it make the point he wanted it to make? Yes. But when you do that with photographs, it says, this is real. This is true. I didn't mess with this. So when you see a photograph like this, it just feels true and real and unmessed with. And yet, if the photograph had been aimed at the water or something, it would have told a completely different story, right? It's not an accident that it's among these soldiers looking forward. Now, what about this photograph, raising the flag on Iwo Jima? Is this image true? Well, I think so, right? Photograph was taken of men holding up a flag. Is it a fraud? Well, it's partly a fraud, actually. And how so? Well, you might know this, but it turns out, originally, after these soldiers, or I guess Marines, probably right, took Iwo Jima, they raised the American flag, and then a photographer was like, whoa, what did you guys do earlier? That sounds amazing. Let's do it again. So this is actually a posed shot of them doing the same thing again later, and this photograph is what became famous, right? So, did they really do this? Yes. Is this photograph of that real event? No, it's not. It's of a recreation of that event. Does that mean it's not true? No, in an abstract sense, it's maybe not perfectly accurate in the legal sense, but it sort of says the same story, right? And see, we get into these gray areas of like, what is true? And what's fake? And what's a fraud? So it's never that easy, right? Like you read the news and it's like, yeah, this is true news, but they're choosing to report on this thing because it tells some bigger story, right? These bodies are real, but they did drag them in front of the camera. Does that change the story? I don't know. So all this to say, there is no accident in storytelling. There is no accident in photography. There's no accident in anything that you see, okay? There's no advertising that's not intended. There's no imagery that's just randomly drawn. It all is there for a meaning. And even all these weird pictures I give you every week in these slides are actually here because they mean something. Now, you don't have to understand what they mean, and some of them are kind of random, but a lot of them actually do have some meaning that's tied to what I'm trying to talk about. So don't read accidentally, right? Why did I put Pinocchio in this one this week? Well, first of all, he's in the public domain, which is why I put most pictures in. But also, what is the story of Pinocchio? It's about this gullible, wooden doll that goes around trusting everyone he meets, and they all take advantage of him. If you read the original Pinocchio, it is weird. So go read it. But you're always weighing the evidence. You're not like Pinocchio, okay? You're not implicitly trusting everyone you see. You have to have your own skeptic's checklist. So whenever you meet new information, you need to ask yourself, where is this information coming from? What's it trying to do? Like, what is it addressing? Anything relevant to me? Is it something that could persuade me? Is that good or bad? Why are they asking me, right? Those emails earlier were like, we need you. You are the one to take the money. Why me is what you should say, right? And where does the reasoning fail? Like, they never explain why me. When new information appears, I ask questions like, is their reasoning logical? And in those emails I saw, the reasoning was not logical. Can it be verified? Absolutely not, right? What about the offer makes me receptive? Well, I want to get money. And when I hear, ooh, I can get money, system 1 starts to kick in and say, money's good. And system 2 starts to shut down and say, okay, sure, right? So you got to be careful with that. So everything that's trying to get something out of you is appealing to you in one way or another, or multiple ways. But there's really 3 kinds of appeals, right? Appeals to authority, which basically say, I'm an expert, trust me, or trust the experts. Or they're going to appeal to emotions, which says, like, you should do this because you feel a certain way. Or they're going to appeal to reason that says, logically, this is the right answer. All of these things can be good arguments. Not saying that one is necessarily better than the other, but all 3 of them can also be abused, and many times they are. Appeals to authority basically say, my expertise is the reason why. It's like when somebody's advertising something to you and they say, 9 out of 10 dentists like this toothpaste, and you say, what's the deal with the other dentists, right? They're appealing to authority because who knows more about toothpaste than dentists? So it's rationally compelling, but it's not deductively valid. I can't prove that makes it good. And especially if somebody goes beyond their own areas of expertise, like once upon a time, Dr. Oz said things that might have been relevant to doctoring, right? And then he kind of spun off and started endorsing all this pseudoscience and stuff, right? So just because he has doctor in front of his name does not mean you should actually take him as an expert and authority on almost anything, which also applies to myself. There's cognitive bias involved here too, because as soon as an expert says something, we think, oh, Tom Brady doesn't eat sugar? Tom Brady seems like an expert. Does he? He's an expert football player. Does that make him an expert nutritionist? Sorry, Tom. You can also appeal to emotion, right? Emotion is persuasive. Who doesn't feel things, right? It's nice to be persuaded emotionally. It's like, I do want to feel things. When people point to, images of, I don't know, like feral cats on TV and say, won't you rescue these feral kittens that are just shuffling around and blinking at me? I'd be like, I will. I'll rescue them all. It's not deductively valid, though. It's not logically sound. It's okay to make an appeal by emotion, but just because something pushes on your heart, tugs your heartstrings, does not actually make it true, right? In that email that we saw earlier, Chris Brown was trying to tell me, my husband died. I have the cancer, And I'm like, oh, heartstrings. And then she's like, and I was an orphan. I'm like, oh, more heartstrings, right? She's trying to appeal to my sense of emotions, but that can be good, and other times it can be completely fraudulent because she doesn't even exist, right? Now, we can also appeal to reason, but as much as this is nice and rationally compelling, it makes sense if you say 2 + 2 = 4, right? And it's actually valid. But the problem is, how many things in life do we actually have access to the logic of? Not very many, sadly. Logic is great for math and, syllogisms, but it's not so good out in the real world because the real world isn't really as bound to logic, or at least the way that we interact with other humans is not particularly bound by logic. So when you think about appeals, you always want to sort of categorize in your mind, what kind of appeal is this? And is that the right thing to do? Because in some contexts, appealing to my emotions is great. In other contexts, it's a sign that someone is trying to pull the wool over my eyes, right? When I see all these TikToks that are oh, find out how I make $100 million every month working from home while my husband golfs. I'm just like, what are you appealing to? You're appealing to my sense that I want to be home with my family and still be able to make money, right? Like, it's not really a logical appeal. Like, it's partly logical, but it's also really trying to push on my feelings. All right, what's this appeal? If the Congress doesn't wise up and tell the American people the truth, this country will fall apart. It's an emotional appeal, right? We don't want the country to fall apart, I guess. Social media is still widely used that safe online behavior should be taught in elementary schools. Social media, tricky. Could be a hot button issue. But if they're just saying, yeah, so people should be careful online, they should teach people to be careful, that's pretty logical to me. Honestly, I think that's a pretty logical statement. This one says marijuana users are not more likely to use heroin than non-users, but only an idiot would use that as an excuse to smoke weed. Well, weirdly enough, that's an appeal to authority because it says, like, I don't want to be an idiot, right? What would an expert do? What does an idiot do? That's what they're basically asking. Advertising does this stuff too. Like this guy right here, he says, real good after he eats a bite of McDonald's hamburger. And he appears to be an expert on the subject because he ate it first, right? So we're supposed to trust him. This one just says Big Mac. I assume it's just appealing to me being hungry, right? That red color is supposed to also make you feel hungrier or something like that. And then this one is like a little bit more of a logical argument, right? It's like, do you want the small one or the big one? I want the big one, obviously. And the big one is at McDonald's. I've never seen one that big at McDonald's. Let's look at some more appeals in emails. Okay, what kind of appeal is this fraudulent email attempting? It says from Mr. Vincent Chang Hoi Chen. Subject is reply me. Okay. Dear friend, let me start by introducing myself again. Well, I just met you. I am Mr. Vincent Chang Hoi Chen, GBS, JP Chairman of Hong Kong and Shanghai Banking Corporation Limited. Ooh, that's a big place. I am contacting you in reference to an investment opportunity of $30.5 million. Oh, it doesn't say US dollars, though, which I believe would be of significant reward to the parties involved. It does sound significant. If you find yourself able to work with me, contact me with your full names, all of them, residential address, and phone number. If you give me positive signals, I will initiate this process towards conclusion. Is he flirting with me? Clearly the appeal is to authority though, right? It says HSBC right down here. This guy's an authority. He's the chairman, right? The boss. I trust his expertise. He knows that I'm the one that should be investing. If a banker ever calls you and offers you like an investing opportunity, and you don't know this person personally, like, it's fraud. What about this one? This one says, immodest ladies are looking for you for a virtual affair. Would you like to send all your domestic problems to hell and relax? These hot cats are ready to make fun of you on a webcam tonight. Why don't you hurry up to them? Just click here. Photos cannot be viewed. Try to look here. I assume the hot cats look more or less like this, right? What are they appealing to? my fetishes, I guess. This one I liked. This one was during a pandemic season. So everyone is on Zoom all the time. They're on the computers all the time. And those webcams, right? Like, they can cause headaches. So this one said, no subject, hello, how does your, and I've redacted a few things from this for the sake of some semblance of taste. How does your blank feel? Still not tired of your blank? Possibly at first this message will knock you back, but it's not astounding. When you visit porn websites, don't be surprised at infecting your device, as well as at the fact that somebody can activate your web camera and shoot your intimate activity with your blank. The instructions are as simple as that. You give money to me, and I will not distribute your intimate videotape among your contacts from electronic mail or share it on the net. After satisfying my requisitions, you will never see me again. You can contact anybody you want, but nobody is going to help you. I will live up to the pledge if you defy my demands. Do not try to communicate with me. This address is going to be deleted on emailing the notice. I reckon 48 hours are going to be enough for tackling the monetary issue. I'll be informed when you open it. Now, you see something like this, and it's funny in this context, but if you opened up this email and system 2 is already shut down, system 1 might be a little freaked out, right? Like, oh, maybe my webcam was on, right? Maybe I left. Don't respond to emails like this, okay? They are frauds. Just give you a little hint, they're frauds. I laughed when I opened this because I was like, no, none of this is true. But this is how it is, and other people will not laugh. They'll be a little freaked out because they'll be like, what if my nudes are really out there, right? What if I lose my job? And it's like, yeah, I understand. It's a scary thing. But I'm just telling you right now, like, they're all lying, okay? And if you're concerned about it, put a little tape over your webcam when you're not using it. Oh, look, this one even has a built-in thing. How cool is that? Or just be like me and don't care. Protect yourself from fraud, okay? Don't buy things online. Oh, that's unrealistic, isn't it? Don't buy things online from sketchy looking places, okay? Ask for everything in writing. If somebody's contacting you and saying, you owe money. We have your nudes. Have them send you something in writing, have your lawyer look at it. Don't pay fees to get prizes, okay? There's a cost involved in winning money. It's not a prize. Understand what you're getting into before you invest, okay? That goes like 110% for cryptos. No rich, unknown person is ever going to show up in your life and leave you money. Sorry. Never send money to people you don't know, unless you're just happy to lose that money. And report fraud when it happens. If you're being defrauded, or you're being blackmailed, or whatever's happening to you, please report that to the police. Report it to the businesses involved. Get some help, okay? Don't just sit there. Be safe in cyberspace. See, this guy appears to be, a model, 21-year-old model online, but in real life, he's this hacker. And I like the be safe in cyberspace in the middle here. This guy's kissing a hand on the internet, but the hand turns out to be the Skeleton King. And Max and the mouse over here being safe in cyberspace. That looks like a good one for kids. This clown down here says, I'm Brad Pitt and I can't wait to meet you. Be safe out there. So here's some good advice. How do you be safe? Well, for one thing, when you answer security questions, don't use real answers. And when you're online, don't answer quizzes that ask you for information about your life, right? And by that I mean, if it says, what is your Christmas name? And it's like, put your mother's maiden name here, and the street you lived on as a kid here, and right, like, people, I don't know if anyone's actually using these things for information, but like, why would you put real information of your own out there unnecessarily? Like, it's easy enough for people to track us down in real life. Why would you make it easier for them? So don't use real life information for passwords or for security questions. It's because everybody's watching you all the time anyway, right? So Facebook or Meta or whatever it is now, by the time you hear this, it's always watching, okay? I found out that you can actually find out how it categorizes you. You can look up interest categories, and you shouldn't use Facebook, but I still do for some dumb reason. And I found out, like, here's all the things that it thinks I'm interested in, just based on its own ads. And I found pages upon pages upon pages of these things. So it thinks I'm interested in Halloween and parenting and real estate and Macy's and 401ks and homeschooling and physical fitness and the New York Yankees and organic food and furniture and Oregon Ducks football, pregnancy, tequila, Alabama Crimson Tide football. I don't know how it got to that. Meal preparation, that's very unlikely. Veganism, extremely unlikely. Tesla, semi-unlikely. Republican Party, Wall Street Journal, the NFL on CBS, Hearthstone, vacations, what? There were more pages. Dragon Quest, yes, I'm actually into that. ESPN Plus, not really. Cryptocurrency, okay. Lou Gehrig, definitely. Pizza, absolutely. Basketball. Adidas, not really. Star Trek, sure. Charitable organizations, I guess. Animal shelters, no. Silence of the Lambs, yes. Doctor Who, sure. Democratic Party, okay. So Democratic and Republican Party, like that. Money, definitely money. There was like 20 more pages of that, of all those, right? Like, so on one hand, I was like, okay, well, Facebook thinks I'm interested in like 1,500 different things. I guess that's fine. Doesn't really narrow it down very well, does it? But at the same time, I'm like, why are you tracking all this? Anyway, work on your passwords, use two-factor authentication, don't get hacked, okay? Make sure your root is secure. If you have a crypto wallet, don't put your personal address online, right? Use private email for financial things. Don't use like your school email or your work email or the email you've used since you were 3 years old. Try to use one specifically dedicated to that. Use password managers to make complex passwords more friendly for you and also help keep you secure. Secure your own devices, right? Like, don't just leave your laptop out logged in. I know you trust your roommates, but how much? I like this relevant XKCD. It's like, how do you make a good password? Well, if you make a short password, it's pretty easy to brute force it, right? It might be a good password to you. It's not a good password to a computer. A good password to a computer is a whole bunch of random words put together that you can remember and make a story out of, and it's going to take the computer an awfully long time to guess that. So don't use correct horse battery staple, but use something along those lines. So the other side of fraud is identity theft. So when somebody's using your data or your identity in some way and pretending to be you, right? Again, hopefully to get some financial gain. Not hopefully for you, but hopefully for them. 18 million households have someone age 12 or older that have experienced identity theft. 35% of U.S. households have experienced misuse or theft from a bank, savings account, or utility account. Total loss is over $13 billion a year, and that number just continues to rise. So this is a big business, right? Stealing people's identities. Thieves can steal your identity by physically getting a hold of your license or whatever, wallet or purse, or your credit cards. They can find receipts in the trash that have information on them that you don't want out there. And those credit card offers, they tend to put a ton of your information in them already ready to fill out because they want you to send it right back. Don't just throw those things in the trash, right? Like, shred that stuff or take it to secure recycling. They'll want to get into your bank accounts. You got to be really careful, again, about the passwords that you use if it just opens the door to all of your money. They'll try to get these passwords via email or text, and you have to be aware of, like, just because it says Chase Bank is calling me does not mean it is Chase Bank, right? How are you going to verify? Well, hang up, call them back yourself. Make sure you get to the real place. Find out, did you call me? The FBI recommends you shred a lot of things like ATM receipts, credit card statements, bank statements, and that you don't give out credit card numbers over the phone unless you're the one that initiated it and you are convinced that this is the place, right? At least online, you can kind of look for the lock symbol to have a better idea of whether you're secure, but on the phone, it's really up to you to do your due diligence, right? And again, just because it says on my ID here, I'm being called by State Farm or whatever, doesn't mean I am. Don't respond to unsolicited emails. Even if they say they have dirty pictures of you working at work, don't respond. Just don't get involved. Okay? They don't. They won't. You can also figure out what's in your mailbox. USPS informed delivery. What's nice about this is they send you an email and it shows you a scan of, like, these are the items that are in your mail today. And then if something is missing when you actually get to the mailbox, you've got a heads up. And remember, mail theft is a federal crime, and people go to jail big time for it, so hopefully nobody's messing with your mail. Reconcile your bank accounts monthly. Like, make sure that the number in there is what you expect to see in there. Not much bigger, not much smaller. Keep records as much as you can, and get copies of your credit report annually. You can get up to 3 of these a year for free if you space out getting them from the different credit bureaus. But at least check it once a year, right? And if you see it, a sudden drop, that's a sign that there could be some fraud involved. You can also freeze your credit, which means people can't just be accessing it, randomly for a small fee. And then that way, new accounts have to be opened with a PIN. So another security feature that you can use. If you do suspect identity theft has happened to you or somebody contact law enforcement. Tell your credit card company or financial institution, and check with your insurance because some insurance companies will offer as part of your policy some protection against identity theft. Remember, identity theft is no joke, despite what Jim Halpert seems to think. And if you feel like a fraud, sometimes we're more susceptible to becoming defrauded, unfortunately. If we feel like imposters, if we feel fake, feel like I don't know what I'm doing with my money, I don't know who's calling me, I'm already stressed out about debt, I don't know about this new job, all those things can make it more likely, unfortunately, that you become a victim of identity theft or fraud. For example, if you're desperate to find a job, it's hard to ignore the fake job offers on Craigslist that promise a lot of money to work from home doing nothing. Or if you have no place to sleep, it's easier to fall for rental fraud and find an apartment that's like, wow, this is so cheap, I can actually afford it. It turns out the person trying to rent it to you doesn't actually own it. If you're living paycheck to paycheck, it's easier to fall for a cashier's check scam. Somebody sends me too much money in payment for an item and they say, oh, can you just send it back? And result is they take everything. If the job is offering you too much for too little, it's probably not real. If the rental is too cheap and you can't inspect it, it's probably not real. If the item you're paying for comes with a huge overpayment, somebody's trying to defraud you. So let's say you buy a new laptop for $500. At the register, somebody's offering you a 4-year protection plan. They're like, we'll sell it to you for $100. Keep it safe, 4 years. Would you buy the warranty or not? What's your first instinct? Yeah, I want to protect that laptop, right? I want to make sure it works for 4 years. Or, no, I think it's fine. I'm not going to add $100 to the cost. Well, it turns out that econs, people who do the math on these things, would not buy extended warranties because they're mathematically a poor deal. But we humans tend to buy them because we want the security and the safety, right? But the result is they often cost more than their expected value. And also there's no other competing service that can say, oh, we can get you a cheaper warranty, right? It's usually like only one thing offering this option. Because other companies don't come in and start explaining to you that you don't need a warranty and you're getting ripped off because nobody's making money doing that. Therefore, you're only left with a company that's trying to sell you a warranty that you don't need. Not saying that they're technically defrauding you, but they're offering you something that's not worth the value of what they're selling it for, right? And so how do we help ourselves as humans to not fall for these kind of things that even if they're not technically fraud, are still taking advantage of us and our fears? Well, you might think, well, capitalism will help us out, right? Because if one company's doing this, another company will come in and say, no, we'll do it better. We'll give you a better warranty that's cheaper. Well, it doesn't always happen because it doesn't always work that way because there's no company out there doing that. There's no competition in the realm of extended warranties. It's a racket, essentially. So econs can say, well, fine then, it's just not worth the money. But we humans, again, say, well, I don't want my laptop to stop working. You become susceptible to these things. Free market doesn't always fix that problem. Usually the price of something signals its quality, but it doesn't necessarily guarantee it. And if there's only one price, they can charge anything they want for that warranty, right? It's kind of like if you think about buying wine. If everyone bought wine not based on the taste, but just on the label, eventually well-labeled wines would become more valuable or more overpriced than they actually should have been. Okay? That's just what happens. That's what capitalism does. The market moves to where there's money to be made. It doesn't move on behalf of individual consumers so much. So to protect consumers, you need to make more competition, right? So maybe you say, oh, well, we shouldn't just have one president because we need some competition. So here's your president that I ordered from Wish. Saw this ad and was like, at first I was like, oh, yeah, okay. And then I was like, wait a minute. That's not the president or vice president. Sometimes free markets don't have any competition, right? Sometimes you can buy the generic brand of Biden and Harris here, but sometimes you can't, right? So learn to read between the lines. Don't accept things at face value. Learn to protect yourself from fraud and hang on to the things that have no strings attached, as Pinocchio always wanted to do. Don't be exploited, okay? Like this tells you the healing power of crystals, and it tells you, oh, what does amethyst do? Oh, it doesn't do anything. What does obsidian do? Oh, it also doesn't do anything, right? Don't let people take advantage of you, okay? You can have crystals if you want. Crystals are cool. They're not going to heal you. I promise they're not going to heal you. They don't do anything. They're rocks. This lady, I don't think, does a whole lot either except make money. And, like, poison people. Okay, allegedly. Her products are not great. Allegedly. And does Jennifer, a local single, really want to talk with you? Probably not, sadly. Now, the feds always take fraud seriously, and I think you should as well, whether you're in the Situation Room or not. Nassim Taleb tells us in The Black Swan, I'm most often irritated by those who attack the bishop but somehow fall for the securities analyst, those who exercise their skepticism against, philosophy or religion, but not against economists, social scientists, and phony statisticians. So he says fraud exists everywhere, right? We might only see one category based on what we believe and what we don't believe, but unfortunately that means we give too many people a pass that are not necessarily telling us the whole story. You can't know everything, but try not to be a sucker, right? Which of those cons are going to hook you the most? Watch out for pyramid schemes, and absolutely watch out for the people who fall for them. Take care of yourselves. Read up. Read more emails. There's more emails actually after these if you want, but have a good day. I'll see you next week.